The Thabo Mbeki Foundation will virtually launch the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs tomorrow. The TM school says it aims to equip its students with postgraduate educational training grounded in the African context and enable them to think critically and independently. Sibusiso Vil-Nkomo is the director of the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Sapisa, and thank you very much for having me on the show.
Let's talk about the significance of launching this aspect of the school, especially as I mentioned earlier on what your objectives are in training the thought process of these postgraduate students.
Yes, we want to develop an enhanced scholarship on African leadership, outstanding graduate students for the African continent, produce them, contribute to Africa's quest to be globally competitive, project the future trends that can lead to Africa's growth and development. We want to move away from the dependency syndrome, whereby Africa as a continent and South Africa as part of Africa remain dependent on what the world tells them what to do and what not to do.
I mean, its founder, Thabo Mbeki, spoke, I think it was even in the last year, about the shortcomings of public foreign policy. And we've seen a rise in European far-right nationalism. So what kind of response from an African context would be adequate for the challenges that we face in this 21st century?
Well, we are looking at Africa participating in multilateral organizations and influencing them to make sure that the African continent is not victim, or Africans are victims of racism and discrimination. This has been happening for too long, and our objective is to make sure that we influence these multilateral organizations. And we want to also influence the private sector. The private sector, whether it be local, continental, or international, because these sectors are very important to actually helping the African continent on making it possible for the African continent not to be left behind or be victims of racism and discrimination.
I mean, a conversation is underway at the United Nations General Assembly about the state of multilateralism. My colleague Sherwin Bryce P spoke about how Africa is pushing for a greater influence. But I recall former President Mbeki saying that South Africa, for instance, needs to be more direct in its approach to foreign policy. What is more direct? What is lacking? What should we be more definitive about, and what should we be asking for?
Well, it's not only what we're asking for, it's also about how do we influence foreign policy in the world. We have always been the recipients of how we should actually implement our foreign policy strategies. We should now be in a position whereby our educational systems, or what we teach young people to be diplomats when they want to be diplomats, when they want to function internationally, they should go into that arena with perspectives which are quite clear. And to be direct, therefore means that we influence and direct foreign policy, whether it be within our own countries, the continent, or the world at large.
And no doubt where we source those knowledge systems, building the capacity, how will you do that for your postgraduate students beyond the direction which you'll be influencing them, but how will you equip them to do that?
We are actually introducing new ways of learning. For example, we want to take diplomats or ambassadors who have served throughout the country, the other countries or the continent or the world. We want them to come back and be a depository of knowledge and information, and for them to educate young people to be able to understand the art and craft of being a diplomat, so that when they go out there, these young people, they're not just going out there as individuals who are fresh from university, but these are individuals who have also learned from those who have been out there in the field, learned, and those people have learned and determined what is the best way to influence the direction of foreign policy.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us. Sibusiso Vil-Nkomo is the director of the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs, which will be virtually launched. Now, students